last few weeks, as the government has introduced restrictions on our activities and movements, one thing that's been happening on social media is the voices of people with disabilities have been reminding the world that actually our current situation isn't too far removed from the daily lives of many people. So as we, as churches, have been suddenly forced to move into an online world, some disabled voices have been lamenting the fact that this is what they've been asking for years. And as we've been expressing our surprise that gathering online is not only possible but beneficial, that we can see each other more often, more regularly, and that we can connect with people who, for whatever reason, would not have been able to come into the church, those who've been asking for such adaptations for years have been doing a collective facepalm. Because we, as able-bodied people, have been brushing over the knowledge that they've been trying to share are somehow not applicable to us, and now that we're in a vaguely similar position, it's as if we've discovered these completely new insights entirely on our own. This made me think about all the other people out there who, whether for physical or psychological reasons, live their lives primarily online, living in a virtual community because they're unable to access the physical community outside their homes. It made me wonder what sort of insights they might have for how we can survive lockdown, how we can cope with confinement, and how we can adapt to separation from our friends and family. Then I remembered that I was one of those people. 20 years ago, I was in the midst of a 4-year period when my anxiety was so bad, I was pretty much in the situation that most of us are in now. I was able to go next door to the village shop, and once every 2 weeks I had to pluck up the courage to walk half a mile up the road to cash in my gyro. Granted, during this time I could see my parents, which I can't now do, but aside from this, my contact with the outside world was almost totally online. And in those days it was on forums and MSN Messenger, not on FaceTime and Facebook and Zoom. And it was for 4 years, not 3 or 6 months. So I thought it might be helpful to share some of the things that I learned during this time that may be useful to us now. It's not meant as a blueprint or an exhaustive guide to lockdown. It's just a few shortcuts that might help other people to adjust. Firstly, it's about the process, not the product. If you're completely stuck at home, you might be finding yourself doing things that serve no tangible benefit whatsoever, and that's fine. During those 4 years, I spent a lot of time doing things that served absolutely no purpose other than my doing of them. I decorated my home horribly. I tried out recipes that failed horribly. I spent endless amounts of time playing mahjong on a very old laptop, and I had an inexplicable routine of ironing things that don't really need to be ironed whilst watching Ally McBeal. Lots of people will currently be trying to adjust to working from home, educating from home, or simply not having anything to do because they have been furloughed or let go. In these situations, it's important to stay active, but it's completely fine if the things that you try to do just go wrong or don't get finished or just generally seem a bit pointless. What you're trying to do is work out where you fit in your new space. What rhythms work for you in your own home, where time is no longer structured by external factors. You're working out what you're good at in this new context, and it's completely fine to let go of all of the things that just don't work. And it's especially fine not to be doing all of the things, all of those Instagram-worthy things that people are showing you on social media. So my second tip is that you can often find connection in unexpected places. Now, I don't know if this will be news to anyone, but people like to argue on the internet. Indeed, for some people, it might actually be one of the processes that they need to go through to work out where they fit in this new life. It's certainly one that I went through. And one thing that you should know, you can't actually win an argument on the internet. It possibly took me a bit too long to work that one out, but that was 20 years ago when arguing on the internet was a relatively new thing. But that's one insight that I can definitely save you from having to work out for yourself. And in the current climate, tempers can be fraying quicker than normal, and it's easy for people to say things online that they would never dream of saying to somebody face to face. And it's also easy to misread intentions when there isn't any non-verbal communication to put things into context. And one of the benefits that being 20 or so years out of my own lockdown has given me is the benefit of hindsight. And over time, I've been able to grow a broader picture of the people that I most often butted heads with online, and some of them even became friends. Now, I didn't agree with everything or even anything that they said, but I was able to see them as whole people rather than faceless opinions. And I was able to appreciate their own stresses and experiences and anxieties. So if I was to give one tip for living life online, it would be the advice from Thumper's mum in Bambi, which is, if you can't say anything nice, don't say nothing at all. And if you can say something nice, then do, because you never know where that connection might lead you. So my third piece of advice is that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Now, for public health reasons, if you're sat at home, then that is literally where you're supposed to be. But it can be also true metaphorically. For each of the roles that we play in our lives, we have a number of associated shoulds. If we're parents, it's I should be able to home educate my children. If we're employees, it's I should be as productive as I was before lockdown. If we're in a relationship, it's I should be better able to support my partner through this time. And if we're a carer or a volunteer, it's I should be out there helping people who are less fortunate. But as we know, these are unprecedented times, and the normal shoulds do not apply, if they ever really did. It can be helpful to practice something called radical acceptance, which isn't the same as saying that you're fine with how everything is at the moment, just that this is the reality at the moment. You don't have to like it, you don't have to fight it, you just accept that it is. And you aren't going to add to your suffering in the moment by focusing on all the ways that that moment could or should be different. For us as Christians, this is what it's like to live in God's love and grace. Dr. Frank Lake, a Christian psychiatrist, describes the cycle of grief and the cycle of grace. When we're living in the cycle of grief, which is different from the grieving process we go through when we lose someone, we're continually striving to achieve things because our sense of significance as humans comes from our ability to accomplish things, and we can never accomplish enough to feel fully accepted. Whereas if we live in the cycle of grace, we start from a position of unconditional acceptance. Our sense of significance as humans comes from God's love, and although we may achieve things throughout our lives, we do not need to have those achievements to maintain our sense of self. And that's particularly relevant at the moment, where for some people it feels as though life is completely on pause, whereas for others there are just so many competing demands that we are unable to achieve any of the things that we would normally like to. I hope these tips have been useful for you, or at least entertaining. As I said, they are just points from my own experience, and there are probably people out there who have had very similar experiences but come away having learned something completely different. And I would love to hear from anybody out there who has their own experiences and insights that they'd be willing to share. I'm particularly aware of the fact that my experience, as with lockdown, had an endpoint, that is recovery, even though at the time, as now, I didn't exactly know when that was going to be. Whereas for people who have chronic illness and disability, there isn't an endpoint in sight. And that is not an experience that I'm in a position to speak about. So I would encourage you to go and look for those voices and to listen to what they have to say. Thank you again for watching this video. God bless.